Welcome to Spiritual Rockstar Podcast, where world-changing spiritual entrepreneurs come to deeply awaken the power within to bring forth their greatest purpose, to create massive awakened impact for millions of souls around the planet, while enjoying being in tune with all life and real wealth in all aspects of their lives. I'm your host, Daniel John Hanneman. All right, hello, everybody. Man, I am so excited. I'm here with an amazing guest, Doug. And how do you pronounce your name again?
Vermeeren. Everybody struggles with that one. It's all good. Yeah, it's all good. we're related to the painter Vermeer, who did the painting "Girl with the Pearl Earring," if you remember that one. So yeah that's sort of the claim to fame, if you will.
Awesome. So it's a little phobia I have sometimes, you can imagine, but so I always double check and ask again and again. So Doug, I'm grateful to have you here, and you just launched this movie. It's getting 3 times the traction of what The Secret got when it came out. You said it's on track to dethrone The Secret as most popular personal development movie of all time. So I just want to congratulate you on that to start off, and
thank you.
I'm really grateful to have you today. So let me go ahead and dive in and share a little bit about you so everyone can know about you. So Douglas Vermeeren is the producer and director of 3 out of the top 10 personal development movies ever made: The Opus, The Gratitude Experiment, The Treasure Map, and he is now revealing his new hit film, How Thoughts Become Things. How Thoughts Become Things goes deeply in the nuances of personal reality creation, content that has yet to be committed to, it has been committed to film, and we've got Bob Proctor in it, Dennis Waitley, John Martini, we've got Joe Vitale, John Asara, Marie Diamond, Travis Fox, and Dr. Karen Perkins to explore how thoughts become things. Doug has also researched the success strategies from business leaders and companies like Nike, Reebok, Fruit of Loom, FedEx, American Airlines, UGG Boots, Uber, KFC, McDonald's, Disney, United Airlines, Microsoft, and others to share their success secrets on film and in his books. ABC Television and Fox Business referred to him as the modern day Napoleon Hill. How fun is that? It's amazing. He is a regular featured expert on Fox, CNN, ABC's NBC, CTV and CBC, and others. Currently, his program, Personal Power Mastery, is rated as number 3 in the world for the most powerful personal development seminars. And he has recently authored the international best-selling book, Personal Power Mastery. Sorry about that. Welcome, Doug. It is a real pleasure to have you.
Well, I'm so excited to be with you. It sounds like we're going to have some fun. Boy, that's quite the long resume. I got to kind of slow down and stop doing so much, maybe, hey?
Yeah, oh my God. No, keep going. It's fun, do it, right? So I love that. So tell me about, my top question was before I took a look at some of the possible questions to ask you. I really was inspired to ask you, what inspired you to make this movie? So let's start there.
Yeah, well, I think for me, the beginning was as I actually went out and interviewed these top achievers, like the world's top achievers. And for me, I guess my background was, as quite frankly, I was broke, right? Like I came from a family where my father worked in construction. My mom babysat kids in the home. We didn't have a whole lot of money. And I was kind of being trained, or if we use the words from How Thoughts Become Things, being programmed to sort of follow the same path, right? Like I was going to wind up kind of in the rat race, and the idea of making more money is always in their minds attached to working overtime, right? Like the more time we put in, the more money we'll make. And so it was just kind of a bit of a challenge for us. And when I started interviewing the world's top achievers, my life really just changed. Right? Like that's how everything changed to me. And so at that point, I kind of got a glimpse that it was attached to my thoughts. But later on, in my life, as I experienced kind of more changes and then had a chance to meet more top achievers and then start teaching it, I really was, how should we say, almost blown away by how much it is attached to our thoughts. And then interestingly enough, I had a friend kind of blurt out one day, thoughts become things, which I had heard in other films and elsewhere. And it was that day that I was kind of like, yeah, but how? Right? Like thoughts do become things, but we've never really talked about the how, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's brilliant. It's so funny, like thoughts. I was brought up in, well, I mean, as an adult, I got started with my spiritual path formally in New Thought or religious science. And the idea was thoughts are things, right? And I love the movie actually got into that. Like thoughts are not things in our opinion. And it's kind of what I heard anyway. Like, and they talked about there's a process where thoughts become things, and that it isn't just because that was always the question, like, what, really every thought I'm having is becoming a thing? And oh my God. So yeah, I'm sure you get that question a lot. I'd love to hear your perspective on that. I mean, we have whatever amount of thoughts, people say 50,000 a day or more or whatever, who knows? There's so much. We're infinite intelligent. We got everything going on all the time. But how, so tell us more about how do thoughts become things? I mean, that's a whole movie.
Yeah.
Did you dive into that?
In a nutshell, sure.
Yeah.
Well, you're right. The studies have apparently suggested that we have between 50,000 and even up to 70,000 thoughts. And the thing that's kind of funny is there's days that I know that I'm at the high end and there's days that I'm at the low end, right? I just feel like, it depends kind of what I'm doing or whatever. But in all seriousness, not all of those thoughts will ever come to fruition. In fact, many of those thoughts are simply just passing thoughts. They have no power, no real connection to anything at all. They're just passing thoughts. And so we've got to understand that not all thoughts become things. And, the other thing that I think is important is to recognize really what is the thought then that we are, and what makes us want to invest our life in it, right? Because we're always trading, right? And the thing to, I guess, remember is when a thought appears, I think the first thing that happens is it arrives in a state of our programming. And if our programming prior to now has given us a certain set of values or beliefs or limitations as well, that thought will then either find more power based on where we are at that moment, or it will be dismissed. And if we have a thought that kind of comes in and it resonates with our values and resonates with our beliefs, and we're also aware of what we really want out of life, and that's another problem, is that many people are on autopilot. But when a thought lands and it connects with something, generally it's assigned now an emotional value, right? Now, sometimes the emotional value is very, very small. Other times it's, wow, it gets us really excited. We feel inspired. We feel really jazzed up about it, and we're just dialed in. And then also the opposite. Sometimes it's something that really makes us upset and angry, right? Because those kinds of thoughts do produce actions too. And, what I kind of feel or have seen now is that thoughts don't arrive individually. So for example, you get this big, wow, motivational idea, exciting, it hits, but right beside it, there's always the opposite that tells you, no, right? You can't do this. Right. You're not worthy. You're not good enough. Here, this is why you should be afraid. This is, right? And so as those thoughts kind of arrive in tandem, we then can make a choice. Either, yes, we believe we could do something with this, or no, we cannot. And this is why. And when it hits the no, generally it finishes with an excuse, right? That's basically it, is the excuse lets it go. And it's funny though, I've noticed that we never make an excuse for something that we don't have power over. We only make excuses for the things we have power over. So if we could do something about it, then we excuse ourselves. If we couldn't do something about it, we kind of don't worry about it, right? So as those thoughts arrive, and let's say it's something that we do want to do, one of the big things that will immediately give that thought power is attaching an emotion to it. And generally it's something we don't even know that we're doing. We just do it and it happens, right? And so if it's something, that we feel, again, that resonates with our values, resonates with our beliefs, we see that there's something we could do about it, all of a sudden we get excited, right? We get excited. And that's when it kind of becomes, if you will, a spiritual creation in our mind. We kind of start working out the puzzle. How could I do this? Like, how will it fit together, right? Like, what does it look like? And the more plausible it seems, we then begin to think, hey, this is reasonable. Our mind will never, ever try to create something that it doesn't believe is possible, right? We might play with it, but we'll never, ever take it to the next step, right? And so as soon as we really believe that there could be a possible outcome of this, And again, remember, with a negative idea, it doesn't have to be a positive outcome. Whenever we just believe that it's like, somebody cut you off in traffic, you get emotionally mad, you lean on the horn, you cut them off. You're not really trying to create anything positive. You're trying to prove a point, right? And sometimes it's not the smartest thing to do either. But we follow that because we believe that it will serve the value that we have or that's been violated, right? Mm-hmm. And then, of course, as we take action, we begin to gain momentum. If something is continuing to give us that value or continue to give us that purpose, we'll continue doing that, and we'll add fuel to that strength, that thought, right? We'll give it momentum, if you will, and that's when it really starts to become things. But one of the interesting things I found is we've done this film is a lot of people, and maybe I'll try and just take a pen here and use my whiteboard behind me. A lot of people focus on that idea of how thoughts become things. I'll just write it here. And what they kind of do is they sort of draw a line down the middle. And most people focus on the thoughts. Like, we hear so many people talk, well, how can I think more positive? How can I overcome fear? How can I beat doubt and discouragement? And they really spend a lot of time thinking about that. Mm-hmm. The other thing they talk about a lot is the things. How can I think a Ferrari into existence? How can I get the money that I want? Or how can I get that ideal, perfect relationship? And so they really think a lot about this side. This is the side they spend all their time with. And the interesting thing is thoughts are happening all the time. And the truth of the matter is our thoughts are never going to be perfect. There will be times when we're thinking negative or fearful, or it's just part of being human, right? So this really isn't the most important thing, to be honest. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And things really aren't the most important thing either. And the truth is, I know this is going to be shocking, we talk about this in the movie, but thoughts really don't make things. Everything that you want already in some form exists, right? You want that Ferrari, it exists. There are Ferraris out there, right? You want the nice house, you want the money, you want the perfect mate, whatever. Everything like that exists. And even the things that haven't been invented yet, the seeds for those exist. The challenges that will lead to those inventions, or the future that's coming will lead to that, right? And so that's not the important side. It really is this side. The first part being the how. So how do we actually figure out which thoughts are going to come out and be something? How do we then stabilize emotions around more of those thoughts? How do we overcome the fears? What is fear? How do we understand that? So this how is actually far more important than the thoughts themselves. It's just kind of like electricity, right? I don't really know how electricity works, but I want to know how to use it, right? I want to know how to capture it in terms of flicking on a light or using it to use the microwave or whatever it is, the TV, the computer, whatever it is. So the how is generally more important than what the actual thing is. But this is the word that's the most important, and that's the become. And the best way I know to illustrate that is a quote that I once heard from Jim Rohn. Jim once said that if you win the lottery and you're going to keep it, you need to learn how to become a millionaire very fast, right? So it's the matter of becoming, and this has a lot to do with the change. Who will we become in this process of how thoughts become things? And you've heard it said in other films, and I think in mine too, we talk about that everything vibrates at a frequency, right? Everything around us. And if you want to have that thing, you need to learn how to become on the same level as it. You need to learn how to do what it takes to attract those things into your life. So it really is about a change. You see, the things itself are about what you have, and everybody talks about that. I want to have this, I want to have that, and the other. The next part is what we got to do, right? So you got to do it before you can have it. And the do really is what you are thinking about, right? And what leads to the action, right? But to get to do and have, we actually have to start with be. And you've heard this before. In fact, there's an interesting quote that I like that my wife actually came up with. You've heard it said that actions, doing, speak louder than words, right? We hear that. Actions speak louder than words. But the truth is being speaks actually even louder than actions. It's interesting. There's a really great book that I enjoyed called The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey, Stephen Covey's son. And he points out in here the importance of this idea of being, among other things. There's a lot of really great things he teaches. But the thing about being that's interesting is that sometimes as humans, we can make a mistake with what we do. In other words, we do something and it hurts someone's feelings, or we do something and it's maybe not the outcome that we intended. We maybe do something and maybe it rubs a family member the wrong way or whatever. Not intentionally, but we do these things sometimes by accident. But I think it's interesting that he points out that when we are the right thing and we be the right thing and people know what our truest intentions are, a lot of the do mistakes can be forgiven, right? But when people are the wrong thing, they automatically generally do the wrong thing. And ultimately, they can't be trusted. That integrity is broken. And so we've got to understand that the universe kind of is the same way. When we, how do we say it? If we want to expand what we have, we must first begin by expanding who we are. It all starts with who we are in the being process. So it's kind of funny because in this, how thoughts and things are written the same size and becomes a little smaller. And we did that intentionally because we wanted people to realize that it's different and it's often overlooked. And people don't really focus on that, right? We dismiss it. And so it was kind of one of these things that those who are now in on the secret of this, they recognize that this is the hidden tool right here. It's really what we become. And as soon as we are aware of our programming, where we are, but also aware of where we want to go, we also recognize another word that's not here at all, and that's choice. And choice is the beginning of becoming, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's so amazing. And I think that there's a lot in there. So I'm to just kind of, to dive it in here. But yeah, with the being aspect, like that's the core foundation to me. And that's what we talk about here on the show. And the people listening in, a lot of them anyway have aspirations or are on their way to manifesting their next great thing or their first big thing or whatever you want to call it. And they're looking for like, well, how do other people like yourself do it? And so you're laying it out here. It starts with that state of being. And I totally agree with that, because it's like if you're unmistakably rooted in that state of beingness, it's like as you take those actions, like you said, you could make thousands of mistakes. But if your beingness is really rooted in your values and your energy of what you're wanting to, what you're intending to create, is how I look at it. It will just happen anyway. It won't matter.
Well, the other thing that's kind of interesting is when we be the right thing by decision, right? Like we decide what we want to be. One of the things that I think is interesting to observe is a lot of people are on autopilot. They don't know what they want to be. They don't understand. They have a rough idea, but they've never really gotten clarity around it. Well, listeners, write this down. A goal that is specific and clear becomes attainable and near. That's the simple of it. And the problem is if you don't know what you want to become, what do we say? You stand for something or you'll fall for anything. So whenever something comes into your path, whether it's the new shiny object, or heaven forbid, it's someone who you allow their fire to become your emergency, right? People that want to kind of hijack your time and your desires and everything else. When you don't know what you really want, what you really are, the desires that you have, you can't really build boundaries and say this fits, this doesn't. And one of the biggest challenges with most people, and maybe here's another interesting thing just to kind of share that I think is interesting. When I first started interviewing the top 400 achievers, I came up with this really interesting concept. I'd never heard it before. I call it the funnel effect. And if you think about a funnel, that everybody pours water in, and sorry about the crooked drawing here, but most people think that if I want to have more in life, I've got to do more. I've got to meet with more clients. I've got to sell more products. I've got to have more products available. I've got to give it more time. I've got to more. And that's actually not the way that success works. In fact, success is actually shifting the funnel upside down. And so instead of doing more, what we do is we do a boundary around what we will actually do. And we go very deep. We get very good at certain things. And we say no much more than we say yes. We don't take on everything from everyone around us. We're very clear on what our mission is. And as a result, we actually get more, right? We don't try to take it all on. And I think that that's a danger that many people have. Like, I don't know, it's always, how should we say, a bit dismaying to see when, an entrepreneur wants to be successful, but they hand me a business card and it's got 5 different businesses on it or something like that, right? Because the truth is life is like a room full of plants, right? And you've got 1 glass of water. If you try and water every plant in the room, it's all gonna die. But if you pick 1 or 2, or maybe 3, you can do really well. And I'm not saying don't have other hobbies on the side, but develop your expertise in one area and go real deep. It's like, I think there's very few people. In fact, I'm thinking of one in particular, Anthony Hopkins, who's an incredible actor. But did you know that he's also an incredible painter as well? Like the artwork that he does is phenomenal, right? But here's the thing, that's a rare treasure, I think. I think genuinely or generally, most people, they find one thing and they can be really, really good at that one thing. But if they try to do too many others, it becomes like jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah.
Right? So we've got to be really careful. I think it's a rare exception. And I'd be willing to bet you if we looked at his life, that it was something that, he got very good at one before really dedicating a lot of effort to the other. And then the two kind of rose in his life like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, I think that would be an interesting conversation to have with him.
Right? I mean, that's your thing too. Let's look into that. See how that works.
Let's look into that. I want to understand it, right?
Yeah. That's great. I mean, so some of the things that I was wondering about, now, one of the things you said I just really had to address is you said we actually need to talk about the how. Now, I'm just working with people's brains. So people say you need to work with the how. They're going to say, I've been taught again and again, and the how's not your business. So can you clarify what you mean? We need to get focused on that how. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, I think that there are certain strategies, and we share some of them in the film, of how we can, first of all, the first step is always awareness, right? A lot of people, they shoot straight to the thoughts. How can I overcome the negative thoughts? How can I get, right? And if we look at the awareness and really start looking at our programming, that'll tell you where the fear came from, right? You'll understand where some of these things came from. And as you bring fear to light, like bring it before you, you can start to understand why we're afraid. Like fear by definition is actually not comprehending the unknown and then assigning it an imaginary result, right? Something that doesn't exist. We don't know what it is, but we assign it an imaginary result. But if we would sit and look at our programming and our awareness, we can see maybe where some of these fears came from. And by the way, the other thing that I'm a firm believer, I love that saying that says, feel the fear and do it anyways.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
Like sometimes it's okay to be afraid and you don't even have to overcome the fear. Many people are saying, well, how do I beat my fear of, heights before I go to a tall building? Well, don't worry about overcoming the fear of heights. Just get onto the tall building.
Exactly.
And I'm not discounting people who have massive phobias. I agree with that. But phobias are generally overcome in the activity of doing, right? Because the more we think about them, the more they entrench it in our mind. Now, the other thing that I think is also interesting about how, which and this is kind of weird because I'm going to shift it from the word how, because there's a better question to actually accomplishing and creating everything. Let me maybe put it this way, is that what is the thing that rises our thoughts the quickest, the most? Well, it's actually our peer groups. It's those that we surround ourselves with, that we allow to influence ourselves. That's where your programming came from, and that's where all your future programming will come from. Who are you spending the most time with? And you've heard that saying that we become like the 5 people we spend the most time with, right? By the way, that verb is spend, not past spent. It's spend, not spent. So those that you were with actually aren't as powerful as those that you're currently with, right? So if you feel like, oh, I was raised in a family that didn't believe this and that, that's an excuse. That's where you were, not where you are. And so it's time to recognize that where you spend your time is more powerful than where you spent your time. So that's the first step. Now, if we're talking about, again, about influence, when I went out and I interviewed the top 400 achievers in the world, one of the things that was very evident to me very quickly is that their thinking was much different than the thinking I was raised with. As I mentioned, my father worked in construction. My mom babysat kids in the home. I loved them to death, but their thinking was really that blue collar kind of let's work hard mentality. When I went to the top achievers, it was a very, very different perspective. And so my thinking evolved like them, to be like them. Now, here's something interesting for you. This is kind of funny. When I started growing my business as an entrepreneur, my very first time I started to grow a business as a young man, I was sitting with one of my mentors and I said, so I'm really curious. I showed him my business plan. I said, what can I do to fix this? How am I going to do that? How is this going to work? How can I make a system for that? How can I solve this problem? And he said, you know what? I can already tell that your business is going to really not do well and it's going to have limitations. I said, well, that's the kindest thing that anyone's ever said to me. Okay, so explain. He goes, well, your problem is you're asking selfish questions. I said, what? I've never heard of that, selfish questions. What does that mean? So, well, every question you've asked was what and how, and it involved you, meaning I. How can I? What can I? Blah, blah, blah. And I think a lot of people struggle with their thoughts because the same thing is they're always asking selfish questions around their thoughts. Am I good enough? Right? How can I overcome this fear? How am I expected to do this? How can I think positive all the time? Right? And he said, the question that you want to start asking is not how can I, but who can help me? Who can do this? Who could give me this insight? Who could teach me how to do that? Who could open the door for this? Who could? And it's all a matter of who. And I think that if we really also look at this for the thoughts, what changed in my life for my thoughts, graduating from what I call a low level to slow level to no level, that's the really bottom stuff. How can you get to the higher level of thinking? Well, the fastest way is to change the people that you hang out with. The things that you are allowing to influence you, that they'll automatically rise. You can't help but think, and you've had events that you've been to or people that you've hung around with, you just can't help but think more inspiring thoughts when you're with them. They draw that out of you. They make you want to be better. They make you want to be bigger. When it comes to the low, the slow, and the no, they don't really ever think that way. And if you thought that way in their presence, it wouldn't stick, right? It wouldn't have power there. Right. But when we hang around with people who are no, low, and slow, well, they feed that, and we can stay there. Mm-hmm. So when we graduate to a higher level of people, I think it's really important. Now, by the way, some people say, well, I don't know any millionaires to go have lunch with. Well, you know what? You do know some people who are more inspiring than the ones you're currently playing with, regardless of their financial status. And it's not always about money. In fact, there's a lot of high level thinking that, in fact, you know, what's really funny is I hang around, I've got one friend that I was emailing him earlier today, but we hang out regularly. And two of my other friends are Academy Award winners that I hang out with them. But this one friend, he's worth about $800 million. Okay, so not bad. You can live on that, right? So when we meet with him and these other people, you never hear really a conversation about how much money they have. It's always about solutions and imagining and creating. And the truth is that resources always follow resourcefulness, right? So this is the way that they're thinking. And it's never about, the petty little things. And they're never really disturbed by problems. And nothing is ever really a problem. In fact, everything is a puzzle. And they're excited to kind of figure it out. And they always take on bigger problems than even the ones that they've caused. So they look and consider how they can solve other people's problems. You know, this is interesting too, because I see that, again, going from high to a low, slow, and a no, the people at this, they love to talk about problems, but without solutions. These guys talk about problems, but provide solutions. These guys look to face problems head on, while these guys look to avoid them. And you see this, and again, I'm not meaning to criticize any of the gurus out there, but when I went and I interviewed the 400 top achievers, I found very quickly that a lot of stuff that's taught in the success books or success seminars that are out there is wrong, right? The reason why is many of these guys are getting it from someone else's book that they've read. They've never really built success for themselves. None of them are multi-millionaires teaching this stuff, yet those are the guys that should be teaching it. But one of the things that I hear just on this idea of solving problems, let's clarify this. You hear regularly this idea of you need to separate yourself from toxic people. All the toxic people in your life, you need to get rid of them. Now, I do agree that if someone's abusive, that's not to be tolerated, but that's abuse. That's not toxic. These are very different. So if someone is abusive in your life, you need to flee. You need to leave that. You need to get help. You need to get out. But if someone's toxic, number one, your programming has told you what toxic looks like. Mm-hmm. It's not always toxic. You're labeling something because it doesn't make you feel comfortable based on how you were raised. Now, the interesting thing is there's two kinds of what we call toxic people. One is a complainer. That's somebody who, whines and moans and complains, but they never give a solution. Remember these guys without a solution, right? But no one said you have to like, subscribe, endorse, or follow a person that's a complainer. But most people at this level, because they're on autopilot, it's easier to say, oh, yeah, you're right. It's terrible. Right? Exactly. Rather than say, this is who I am. And, okay, you're entitled to your opinion, but I don't have to own that. I don't have to endorse it. It's not me, right? You can go do your things. And I'm not eliminated that toxic person. I've just given them the right to express themselves how they want, right? So I've eliminated the connection to the toxic, but I've not eliminated the person. Top achievers don't run from problems, remember? They know how to manage them. Now, the other kind of toxic person that most people talk about is a critic, right? But here's the thing with a critic is a critic generally does have some facts behind them. They sometimes do have a solution. The problem is they aren't always great communicators. So when they share it with us, it hurts our ego to hear some things that we might need to change. So it's easier for us to call him toxic rather than to say, I need to listen to this. Right? Think about when you were in high school. I don't know about you, but this is very, very vivid memories. I'd have people come up and say, like my mom, be careful who you hang out with, right? Be careful of your friends. Those guys are going to get you into trouble. I didn't want to hear it, right? I didn't want to hear that. That's a critic. I could say, Mom, you're being toxic to me, right? I could say that. But the truth is what she was saying was true, right? She maybe just didn't have always the best way to communicate it to me. So we need to understand that if you're going to be a top achiever, if you're going to play here, you do not eliminate toxic people. You eliminate your ego, and you start being teachable, and you start listening more carefully, right? And I'm not saying that you've got to always endorse everything that a critic is telling you, but there is always a grain of truth in that too. And the more we can listen and receive it, the more power we'll have.
Absolutely, Doug. I mean, there are some people that are just they're designed that way. That's part of their gift. They're meant to bring that, like, you know what, let me tell you, these are all the problems that you're having right now, and this is what needs to be done. That's how they are. That's their gift. That's their contribution. So if we say, oh, you're out of my life, I don't, because my wife could be like that, for example. Like, so, but that's what I love, because I'm more like, everything's happening and it's all good and blah, blah, blah. But then I might miss some of the stuff that needs to be addressed, right? So having that kind of partnership, she's able to like, no, you need to pay attention to this. I'm like, okay, so we need to look at this. So I totally agree with that aspect. But I did want to, I'm glad you clarified that, because I was wondering from the movie what your perspective was, because it was like, oh, you want to be with, the usual, be with the high frequency people, or however you want to look at it. But be with the low frequency people too. But you added some explanation to that it's not about throwing them out, but it's about not going with all their stuff that doesn't really contribute to you. It's not your thing. Like, you want to stay with that stuff, go ahead. I don't, but I'm not there.
But the challenge is that most people have never taken the time to figure what they stand for.
Right.
So that's why when whatever comes along, they're in a reaction mode rather than a predetermined way. In fact, here's something really funny. I love this. Let me just erase this and I'll show you this. When I was a kid, I went to a youth camp once. And this is, again, as a teenager, right? And there was a teacher who on the board who talked about this idea, and he drew this line that's there, right? And he said, and he was trying to teach, kids not to get in trouble with premarital sex and relationships, right? And he said, let's say that this is, winking at somebody. This is a smile. This is holding hands. This is maybe peck on the cheek. This is a little hug. This is a big kiss. This is a bigger kiss. Now there's other things involved, blah, blah, blah. And here's the deed, right? And then all these things that go after. He says, so little young men and young women here, could you tell me where you're going to say stop? Are you ready? Tell me when you're going to say stop. And you can do this with me too. Are you ready? And Marcus said, go tell me stop. And nobody, and he did it before any of us had a chance to say stop. And he's like, well, this is the way it is with real life, whether it's premarital sex or whether it's with drugs or whether it's with all these things it could be. And he says that we as people, unless we set a boundary beforehand and say, this is our finish line right there, oftentimes when we're in the heat of a moment, when we're in the emotion of things and things are rolling, it's very difficult for us now because this becomes gray to identify. And when we hit that line, we may not always recognize that we're there yet, right? And so we end up going the full distance without really understanding what just happened. And I think that that's with a lot of people. Like when they come, and I don't mean to sound negative because I think I'm guilty of this too. When I go to a seminar or an event or I meet a top achiever, I'm really inspired because that person is inspiring. And when I'm with them, I want to be really good. I want to do amazing things. I want to accomplish powerful stuff. But now all of a sudden, when I'm on my own, if I haven't made a plan personally on how to use it and to deal with it, I actually kind of, how should we say, I become affected, and here's an interesting word considering the virus, infected, based on who I'm around. And so if I'm around low-level people, I become more low-level. If I'm around the high-level people, I become more high-level. Mm-hmm. But if I make a decision privately, we keep quoting like the Coveys here. So here's Stephen Covey, a private victory precedes a public victory, right? In fact, in my opinion, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is the most powerful personal development book ever written, better than any other book that's ever been written on it, period. But if we decide privately what's important to us, if we decide privately who we're going to be, if we decide privately already the things, the way that we'll treat other people, the way we'll respond, whenever a life circumstance comes, we already have our boundaries set. But again, the problem is I don't think we spend enough time building those private decisions, right?
Right, right. I mean, that's something I've done a whole course, I taught a whole course on in the past because it's so important to me. Like,
Mm.
what, Barker, I forget his first name. But anyway, the power of decision. And
Mm.
Raymond Barker, I think is his name. So anyway, so I taught a whole course on it because it was so, it hit me so strongly in my teaching and my learning. And I was like, and how I utilize it in my life, like I had to make the decision. And then most people have no clue how to make these decisions in their lives.
No.
Like, I decided, no, I've thought it, I imagined it, I did everything. But did you really?
Well, the other danger too with decision, and this is something that I noticed, and we teach in personal power mastery, most people make decisions incorrectly. They make decisions based on where they are, not where they want to be. What I mean by that is an opportunity comes into their hands, and the first thing they say is, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough money, I don't have enough knowledge, I don't know enough people, it's all about lack, and they're finding a way to escape rather than thinking about it. People make decisions like that too quickly, by the way, too. But if you think about what a decision really does, is it creates the future, not the present. So if you want to have more money, if you want to have more time, if you want to have more opportunity, more whatever, fill in the blank, the only thing that will change that is a new decision. So we can't make decisions based on what the current circumstances are. If we don't have enough money, maybe it is time for a new decision. If you don't have enough time, it is time for a new decision, because the only thing that will make your future better than today is if you start making a change. It's that idea again of become, right? Mm-hmm. And we've got to really be able to, how should we say, let go of the fear. You cannot climb a ladder if you're not willing to let go of the rung you're on and reach for a higher one. If you have to hold on to where you already are, if you feel like this is your reality and that's the way it's always going to be, you'll never be able to rise higher. And the crazy thing about this is that the universe itself, if we look at it this way, is always in expansion mode. Ever since the Big Bang, everything is expanding. Trees grow, grass grows, everything grows. And so if you say, I'm going to just stand still, you're fighting against the entire universe, right? You're a Blockbuster Video waiting to close its doors forever and ever and ever, right? So we've got to always be in a mode of expansion like the universe. And anytime we make an excuse, or anytime even outside of ourselves, even if we're, kind of with what's going on in the world right now, if we're trying to contract or stop someone else or slow them down or hold them back, anything, we're actually in opposition to the universe, right? And the universe is an echo chamber. How you show up will determine what shows up for you.
Right, exactly. It's all about that state of being, isn't it? So, so we need to let go, because there's a lot of things people can be fighting and getting entrenched in, especially now with fear, right? All that fear, and there was something from the movie about that, but I forget what it was. But I wanted to ask you about that, but. Yeah, I mean, we have to clear the fear. That's something I've been really talking to people a lot about right now, because there's been so much fear. And, so making a decision not to go with that fear, I think is really important, really, really important. We have to create a container where we're not going to allow ourselves to give ourselves to one of the speakers I remember saying, Joe Vitale, he actually has been on one of my things before, and he talked about, he says, don't watch the mainstream media, basically is what he's saying, and don't do the social media rants. Don't, because it absolutely brings you
It'll
down.
mess you up.
You don't even realize sometimes. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's true. Definitely true.
Yeah, so anyway, so there's so much more we could get into, but we're at our time, getting to our time limit soon here. So first of all, where can people, I mean, it's a great movie. It really is. At first, when I started listening to it, quite frankly, I was like, well, I don't know. I know there's lots of things, sort of. I know this stuff. But as I went into it, like, it has these nuances, like you're getting into today, things that you haven't really heard so much before. So it's really well produced. So people ought to check it out. Where can they go to do that?
Sure. Well, the easiest place is to simply head to the title of the film, www.howthoughtsbecomethings. So howthoughtsbecomethings.com. And the cool thing is right now, if someone's wanting to go see it, there actually is a variety of bonuses and gifts that we give you. One of the things I'm really actually proud of and I think is great is there's a workbook that you get when you get a chance to see the film. And the workbook allows you to take a lot of these things into greater detail and also kind of have the film as the beginning of a conversation, right? So it gets you thinking, but it's also something that you can share with others to help you really start kind of implementing it, which I think is the goal, right? Implementing is the key.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you watch the whole thing and not take any action on it. It's not going to change your life. It's just going to be like, oh, that was a nice moment. So
Fair
yeah,
enough.
absolutely, you want to get in there and get at it. So howthoughtsbecomethings.com is the place to go. And so one of the things I do, if I think you said you were open to this, I just take a minute or two just to tune in if I get any downloads for what I see unfolding for your work and stuff. So if you don't mind me sharing, it's one of my things is to support people in the world. Can I maybe share a couple of quick things?
Yeah, please. I'm excited. I'm very curious, actually.
Awesome. Okay, great. So let me just tune in for a second and see what's going on. Now, I also see a possible restriction, so I'll mention those as well. So
yeah, let's hear it.
Yeah. So you've got your energy is amazing. I do see some kind of restricted energy in terms of in your brain, kind of in a way, like it's just lit up, but it's like there's a little bit of that squeezing thing. You're trying to get that focus, right? But you have such a buoyant, enthusiastic energy that it's almost like if you could relax some of the energy up in here a little bit more of the relaxation energy, you'll get even more force coming through. So that's what's coming through to share with you today. So if we can relax, let that energy drop in even deeper, and in a more relaxed fashion, realizing maybe it isn't going quite as much, but like just let it come through, that'd be amazing. And then I do feel like, as far as I get like, I talk about chakras. So I look at third eye energy, like an intuitive center, that you've got a real ability to see that picture, right? So I mean, you make pictures, but you see you can see a panoramic view of what wants to happen in your various cells. So you have a voluminous amount of information, obviously, from this interview. It's no doubt about that. But like I see in your energy, you have even so much more to give constantly, and so it's so energizing for you. And I feel like I see definitely. I didn't ask you if this is going to become a book. Maybe you can answer that in a second.
It is.
But I see, yeah. I can see more and more like you doing more and more books. I see lots of books pouring out in the near future. So anyway, so
I better get ready and start writing. Hey,
I could go on and the things I see, but I just wanted to share. I like to share a little bit with my guests because it's just exciting, right? To see, like, man, if we can just allow ourselves to. Sometimes it's because it was in the movie a little bit like, let's be man, that force and the emotion, everything, and that is super powerful, and that is required at times on our path. But also when we surrender more too, this sense of a surrender, yet there's an invincible force behind it. And that's if I have one thing is from an energetic perspective, I see like I could see your purpose being like fulfilled even more from this state. So anyway, so that's what was coming through.
Oh, that's cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. That's cool.
Sure thing. And then yeah, if people want to check me out, you can go to yoursacredpurpose.com. I've got a meditate and make money meditation in there, so you can open up your chakras, get the downloads, hear the thoughts. What I loved about the movie is you talked about rather than just like, oh, just think what you want, boom. But like you're tuning into a frequency of what wants to happen through you already. It's there. If you listen, is how I heard it through the movie. The frequencies are there, right, Doug? And so this helps you to listen into that frequency and lets that happen. And so check that out. It's for free. People are growing their businesses, et cetera, through that and more. So anyway, so that's what I have to share.
Cool. Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah, get the movie. Things.com. Get into it. Work the process. Absolutely. This isn't just another movie. This is really powerful stuff. And I'm really grateful again to you, Doug, for showing up here today. And we're here to help people expand and change the world. The people are listening in, my knowing, my intention, and what we're drawing here, people are ready to activate their greatest potential to make the biggest difference possible from the deepest place possible, and it's happening. So I'm grateful you come here to contribute so much wisdom. You're just filled with so much to share, so I'm so grateful.
Thank you. Well, it was fun. We had a good time today.
Yeah. All right, great. And we look forward to whatever's next through you too. So, all right,
Well, thank
everybody.
you.
So everybody, thank you all for listening in. You keep on tuning in here, and we'll keep on rocking it here on Spiritual Podcast Show. And until the next time, everybody.
Perfect.
You're listening to Spiritual Rockstar Podcast. Stay tuned for our next upcoming new episodes each Wednesday and Saturday. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review to help us to serve you best. As a reminder, you can get your free Meditate and Make Money meditation at www.yoursacredpurpose.com to rock your sacred purpose. Goodbye for now, everybody.